Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Thursday, April 10th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 521 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got some more New York Jets news to discuss. Justin Fields spoke to the media in a press conference yesterday for the first time since signing with the New York Jets. We'll break that down to open up today's podcast with my biggest takeaways, and we'll also get into some surprising news. Allen Lazard and the New York Jets have renegotiated his contract. I'll break down what that means for Lazard and the Jets as well later on in the program. As always, though, before we begin, we got to get into our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, if you want the hottest tickets in sports or entertainment, plays, concerts, shows, you name it, SeatGeek has it. Use code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek and get yourself out to some awesome events. And also our friends over at Huga House, if you want any of their awesome new arrival sweatshirts and hats or their original hats, check them out and use code BUBS for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 521. Thank you, as always, for joining me. We are just 2 weeks away, 14 days from the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay. Stay tuned. We'll have a ton of draft coverage all draft weekend along breaking down every single New York Jets draft pick made by this brand new regime. So stay tuned. Excited for that. We'll finally get our answers after many months of discussions and speculation. 2 weeks from today, night one in Green Bay. Jets with the 7th overall pick. Today, though, I wanted to get into two pieces of Jets news. Yesterday, Justin Fields spoke to the media for the first time since becoming the quarterback here for the New York Jets. And of course, we'll get into Lazard taking a pay cut a little bit later on. Interesting. Finally, nice to hear Justin Fields. This was actually an interesting note that I found out yesterday. The Jets are the only team up to this point that didn't make any free agent available to the media after signing them. That's obviously clearly different from previous years, previous regimes, but it shouldn't come as much of a surprise because Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji have talked about it a lot, moving in silence, kind of going about the offseason quieter than we've seen previous regimes. And Glenn and Muji have talked about it a lot, right? Ultimately, what you do on the field matters most. Winning off seasons is not going to get it done. We know that very well as Jet fans. So it's been a very silent offseason, very silent approach, even with the signing. So this was the first time Fields spoke yesterday. And the Jets were the last team to make one of these free agent signings available. Jamie and Sherwood also spoke, and Brandon Stevens as well spoke as well. But the biggest one was Fields. I'll play this first clip here. Justin Fields, this was him on his excitement level of joining the Jets.
What is it about the New York Jets that makes you feel like you can establish yourself or cement your place as a starting NFL quarterback? What about the situation do you really like?
Yeah, I think just the people, in the building, the coaches, my teammates, and really just everybody that's ready to, get this thing rolling and get this thing going. So, of course, I know everybody around here is very excited, and so am I. So I'm really just ready to get to work.
So that was Fields on his excitement level. These next couple clips here are really going to get into the meat and potatoes of what he had to say and some of my bigger takeaways. I thought this next clip here I wanted to play it early. This was about just his role, and I thought some of Fields' comments in here were pretty interesting on his role with previous teams, how he was basically doing what he was asked to do, and how that all kind of relates to why he signed with the Jets. Here is Fields on that topic.
Justin, when we were talking to Aaron Glenn last week in Florida at the owners' meetings, he said that while you're a dynamic runner, their hope is to really develop you as a quarterback, to let you truly play the quarterback position, which he felt that maybe wasn't the case in your two previous stops. I'm wondering if you could speak to that and whether you feel like in the previous stops you didn't get a chance to fully play the quote unquote the position.
I mean, I think I was asked to, I did what I was asked to do, and I've never had a problem with that. I've always been a team player. I've always been, advocating on, putting, myself behind the team. So, like I said, I'm not really gonna get too much into depth on, what was happened in Chicago and what happened last year with Pittsburgh. But like I said, I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had. I met a lot of great people there, built a lot of great relationships that'll last a lifetime. And, I think, of course, the more time you have in the league, the more experience you have. So, like I said, I think I'm, progressing and getting better each and every year. So, like I said, I'm excited to get things rolling this year.
So that was Fields just on his role. And I'll say this, one thing that I think you can take away, not really just from a football element, but just from a personal element, Fields is a very easy guy to get behind. You even just hear him there, right? Not going back and crushing his former stops or saying things about his former, stops in Chicago and Pittsburgh, although things obviously didn't go as well as many planned and expected. He kind of took the high road, right? And I think the biggest, and you can understand, how a locker room can, rally around him hopefully this year. And it will just be an easy guy to root for as he tries to rejuvenate his career. Just a very humble guy and a very couple humble answers, yesterday, understanding what he needs to do and where he's at. But I thought a couple different things that there were interesting. The biggest one is, in those previous stops, especially last year in Pittsburgh, he knew his role and he played to his role. I think that was interesting because I think when you look at Chicago and mostly really last year in Pittsburgh, like Fields said, he did what he was asked to do. And a lot of that was just manage the game, don't make mistakes, don't really take risks, play within the offense, do what you're told. And that's kind of it. And while you do need to be smart and all that, I do think Fields viewed the Jets and the Jets view Fields in a similar light. And that is the Jets are going to allow Fields to open things up a little bit. Glenn has talked about it a ton, most recently at the owners' meetings, about they want him to play quarterback. They want him to utilize his arm more. They feel there's more there from a passing perspective. We all know what he can do with his legs, right? Outside of Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields is number 2 when it comes to quarterbacks on the run. His mobility is right up there with Lamar and some of the other guys in the NFL that can move around. We all know that. But now it's time for him, especially if he wants to rejuvenate his career and take another step and have a Baker Mayfield-esque resurgence. He needs to do more with his arm. He needs to do more from a passing perspective. And I think you kind of read between the lines of that answer. Certain times in Chicago and even mostly last year, he didn't quite get the opportunity. Yes, he was starting, but I think just the way the offenses were built, what they were asking him to do, it wasn't really an opportunity for him to fully break out. They were kind of cuffing him in a way. And I think you look at the Jets, and the Jets view Fields as a guy that's got more there. And I think Fields views the Jets as a team that can let him take more chances, take more risks, throw the ball downfield a little bit more, stretch the field, throw the ball more than he actually has, not just manage the game, right? Become a better passer. Be that guy. Try and get to where he was in Ohio State and the number one quarterback coming out of Georgia, which was a guy that was a dual threat quarterback who can do great things with his arm and great things with his legs. And you have to hope that Tanner Engstrand and this Jets coaching staff, that's ultimately what's going to come down to, is coaching, can get that out of Justin Fields. And Fields can have the trust and the ability in himself to do the things that the Jets want him to do and do some of the things that we saw him do going back to college. So I thought that was a really interesting answer. And I think that's what makes the Jets and Fields an intriguing fit. And I also think Fields realizes, and everybody realizes, this is kind of his last opportunity from a starting perspective. If this doesn't work out this year, he's not going to go to another team and jump right in as the starter. You're just looking at essentially just a backup and starting in a case of an injury. This is it for him. And choosing this spot, I think he realizes this is the best spot from a coaching perspective where they're going to trust him and try and get the most out of him. And hopefully they can. Most likely, will this just be a bridge? Yes. But there is that possibility Engstrand and the staff can get more out of Justin Fields than what we've seen here through his first 4 years, which is an average at best passer and a very good runner. We'll see how it all plays out. But thought that was an interesting answer. I also thought this was something else that I thought was interesting and wanted to talk about. This was Fields on Glenn as a coach, talking about him a little bit. And even just as well, Fields talking about culture and winning and the difference from Chicago and Pittsburgh, now here to the Jets, discuss Glenn. Thought this was interesting. Here was Fields on all that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've been on good teams. I've been on bad teams. So just the mindset and really just, like you said, the leadership. And AG has been in the same situation to where, Detroit, they didn't start off hot. So I think he knows how to take a bad situation and turn it into a good one. So, I've seen, I've been on teams that have been, 3-14 and stuff like that. And, of course, last year, Pittsburgh, we had a pretty good team making it to the playoffs and had a hot start. So I've seen both sides of it. So, I can kind of tell the difference between just the characteristics of a team that is not doing so well and the characteristics of a good team. So, of course, really just trying to implement that into, our team and try to get all the, good characteristics and just find the recipe of, what makes us a playoff team. So, yeah.
I thought that was a good answer from Fields and something to definitely discuss because we've talked about that a lot, right? When you're trying to change this culture and you want to look for guys that have been in cultures before, been there, done that. I've said it many times, right? I wanted a proven coach. I wanted a proven GM, guys that have been there, done that. Jets obviously didn't go that route, but if they were going to go the inexperienced route, you preferred them to go down a route where you had a guy from a previous winning culture, especially in a Jets case where it was a winning culture that was just recently established. And that's what you have here with Aaron Glenn, right? You hope that he can take some of what he learned in Detroit, right? He saw Dan Campbell, even Brad Holmes, 2 first-time guys go into an organization that was perennial losers in Detroit, dumpster fire, and turn it around. You hope he can take that and add it here with the Jets. He was on those Jets teams that saw the turnaround with Bill Parcells as a player. Same thing with Darren Muji. He just saw the turnaround with Denver in a very similar situation, even more similar actually than Detroit's turnaround, because they went all in on Russell Wilson for 2 years, didn't work out. They turned it around and boom, last year they were in the playoffs, which was one of the biggest surprises of the league. So you hope those two guys can take those experiences and add it here. And I think Fields as well, he was in Chicago for 3 years. He saw all the losing that went on. He was one of the biggest faces of it, of course, being the quarterback, right? He got a lot of attention for it. But then he goes to Pittsburgh and he saw how things were run. He saw the difference in organizations. A 3-14 win team. He's, right? That's what he talked about in Chicago. And then last year, yes, Pittsburgh lost, and yes, he got benched, but you still saw a team that year in and year out is winning games, not having losing seasons. They're going to have winning seasons. They're going to make the playoffs. So he saw that difference. And You know, you hope some of that can play into rebuilding this Jets culture and turning this thing ultimately into a winner. Thought that was an interesting answer, though, because I don't think many people view Fields as that type of guy, but he did go to Pittsburgh last year and see the complete 180 from a Chicago organization that hasn't done any winning in years to a Pittsburgh organization that is one of the stronger ones from a winning culture perspective, where year in and year out they're competitive. One last thing. This was Fields on reuniting with some of his Ohio State teammates, including, of course, Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. Of course, you know, we played together in college, and, you know, when I saw him, it's really just like the old days. So I don't think our relationship skipped a beat. So, of course, I'm definitely excited to play with him, guys like Ruck and, you know, Josh Myers. So I'm excited for that, and, of course, things that we can do to help get each other better, just, you know, get back on the same page as we were in college, and, of course, communicate, you know, make sure we're always on the same page when it comes to concepts and routes and, you know, what he's doing in certain situations. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to be back on the field with him for sure.
I'm just hoping, man. Fields, Garrett Wilson connection. Can we see some vintage Ohio State moments from those two? And that all will come down to hopefully Fields turning into a better passer here. So those were some of the bigger takeaways from Justin Fields' press conference. Nothing crazy, of course, but definitely some clips that I wanted to share, some insight I wanted to share, some takeaways. It was nice to see the quarterback there at the podium as the offseason workouts have begun for the New York Jets. Of course, they could start earlier with the new regime hiring a new coach. They began those on Monday, April 7th. So those will continue here. Next topic here today on the podcast as we roll on. Surprising news this morning, right? Very surprising. Get up this morning as a Jet fan, and I don't think this was something that you'd be expecting to see. I think if you had to tell me that I would be waking up to Allen Lazard news, I would have probably been saying it was some sort of trade or some sort of cut or something. Not a contract restructure, but that's exactly what we did get this morning. Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap reported earlier today the Jets and Allen Lazard have agreed on a revised contract for 2025. Will result in $8.5 million in savings. Want to break down this a little bit more before I give you some of my thoughts. So, again, it is that $8.5 million pay cut. He was scheduled to make $11 million this year, now just $2 million. So, drop significantly. Some other numbers. His cap number, originally $13.2 million this year, was his cap hit. Now drops down to $4.6 million. And his guaranteed money now is only about $1.75 million. So a very team-friendly renegotiation, very team-friendly pay cut here for the Jets that results to $8.5 million, because Allen Lazard's contract compared to his performance over the last 2 years has been not anywhere near each other. Contract way up here, performance way down here. So the restructure here is nice. I will say this, though. I still don't think this 100% means that Allen Lazard is going to be on the Jets in 2025 when week one rolls around. I still don't. And the reason I say this is, to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lazard is a Jet. I also still wouldn't be surprised if he is not a Jet when week one rolls around. To me, I think this gives the Jets, kind of puts themselves in a better situation with Allen Lazard, because it puts themselves in a better situation where they can still trade him and maybe even cut him if they like what they do in the draft, or let's say training camp rolls around and Tyler Johnson and your draft pick and Josh Reynolds, whatever, the receiving room looks really good. Lazard doesn't, and you want to move on. It makes it a lot easier to cut him and swallow it now with the $8.5 million cap hit, as opposed to the $13.2 million cap number and the $11 million he was scheduled to make this year. You could also still trade him and take the blow a little bit more. I could still see a world where Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers and Allen Lazard says, you know what, because the Jets did give him permission to seek a trade, right? Allen Lazard says, I want to go there. I could see a late round swap, Lazard in a 6th for like a 5th. I could still see that happening. I think to me, this just gives the Jets a little bit more flexibility where if they want to keep him on the roster, okay, you keep a veteran receiver, 29 years old, 3rd year with the team, who hasn't played well. You lower his contract because he could not possibly play under that contract this year, and he could not possibly, or you could not possibly take that cap hit for a guy like Allen Lazard with the way he's played the last 2 years. So it gives you that aspect, and it also still gives you the flexibility of we can move him still in a cut or a trade if the offseason, you like what you do in the draft, whatever. A team comes calling or training camp rolls around and you feel like you don't need him based off of what you're seeing in camp, whatever, it gives them some more flexibility. So it's a smart move here, I think, from the Jets. That's kind of what I want to say. Like, I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, guaranteed Allen Lazard now on the roster. I don't think that's what this means. I think this is the Jets giving themselves some more flexibility. And I still think the door is obviously still wide open for him to play for the Jets this year. But I also think there is still that case that he's not here. Just gives the Jets more room to move in a way. And you look at this Jets receiving core, Lazard is another body. And I think that could be part of the Jets thought process as well. Right? They do not have many talented receivers. They don't have many guys that you love behind Garrett Wilson. We've talked about this a ton. It's pretty ugly. It's not pretty. It's very ugly. It's Garrett Wilson and a bunch of question marks. Yes, you signed Josh Reynolds, who I do like that signing, but you're probably looking at a wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 2 upside, but most likely wide receiver 3. Malachi Corley, what is this? A wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 3 upside. Allen Lazard's probably a wide receiver 3 at best. So you have a wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson, absolute beast. And then you have real no wide receiver 2. And then a bunch of maybe a 1 or 2 wide receiver 3s. And then a bunch of wide receiver 4s with like Gibson and Corley and guys like that. So it's still a room that needs a lot of help. And there's a lot of pressure on Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn to find a wide receiver in this draft. I expect that to most likely come in the 2nd or 3rd round, because I don't see a world where it seems like it's heading in that direction of Armand Membu or Tyler Warren. But I think your first 3 picks for the Jets have got to be some combination of, a pass catcher, an offensive lineman, and maybe a defensive player, something like that. But they're going to have to find a way to pick up a wide receiver and find a legitimate threat alongside Garrett Wilson that can be a legitimate number 2. Because while Lazard is a body and is a veteran piece, not that good. It's not that good. Not that good. He's actually been terrible. 5 drops in 2023, 8 more drops last year. That's 13 drops in 2 years with the Jets. He is a good blocker, which is something the Jets do value, right? Josh Reynolds is a good blocker when it comes to the run game. That is something that this regime values, something that Tanner Engstrand and the Detroit Lions background values. So that could be part of it, but when the receiving numbers, the drops, they speak for themselves. The penalties, the soccer ball. He quit on the team in 2023. There's not a lot to like from Lazard. There's just not. 26 games played, 60 receptions, 109 targets, 841 yards, 14 yards per reception, and 7 touchdowns in his 2 seasons here with the Jets. So, creates a little bit more flexibility from the Jets side of things. I'll see it when I believe it. I think that's the biggest way with Lazard. If he's out there week 1, okay. I still think there's a world, though, where he's not out there. And he could still be moved some way, shape, or form. I could also see the world, and that's probably most likely, and that is that he's on this roster. And even though he's a veteran and he's another body, this team still needs a lot of help from a receiving perspective. They've got to hit on a legitimate wide receiver in the draft to pair next to Garrett Wilson. And then you hope that, Reynolds can be serviceable. Maybe Tyler Johnson could take a jump. There's still a lot of questions even with that. But only time will tell. Right? This coaching staff will have their hands full. Can you develop Tyler Johnson into anything? Can Malachi Corley be anything after last year? Reynolds and Lazard kind of who they are. But if you can get a good rookie and, Johnson and Corley to play a little bit better, that could boost it a little bit. So still a big hole and still a big focus and still a big amount of pressure on this front office to nail the draft pick. But Lazard's back for now. Restructured for now. So another veteran sticking around for this Jets team. Reynolds, Lazard, two veterans, back half of that wide receiver room. I like Reynolds over Lazard. I think we've talked about it a lot. Reynolds is a similar player to Lazard, except he doesn't have the drops and the penalties, which is why I think he's actually better. So Lazard returns. Kind of, see how it plays out. I still think there's a couple more dominoes that have to fall in that wide receiver room from a addition perspective. And training camp will be very interesting to see how that whole room plays out and where everybody is come week 1. Very interesting. But Lazard's still in the fold. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on Justin Fields' comments? Any big takeaways there? And what are your thoughts on Allen Lazard and the $8.5 million pay cut earlier today? So that'll do it. Another episode in the books. Appreciate you all as always. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.